Good.
Yeah. All right. Good morning, everybody. This is a association upgrade. We're streaming through the CSRA Facebook group, but we'll also be sharing this via YouTube and podcast later on. I'm joined today by Andy Cook. How are you, Andy?
I'm great. How are you, Lex?
Good. Testing out some new equipment, a little bit of different scenery here, Sunday morning at home. And for those of you who are joining us this morning, you can go ahead and just enter any questions in the closed Facebook group for CSRA, and we'll try to answer some of those questions for you. So most effective vehicles for communications during the pandemic. Obviously, video has gone up. Print media seems to have, I don't know if gone away is the right way to describe it, but certainly not the priority that's been before. What have you seen has been the most effective ways that you've seen people communicate with their customers and members?
I'd like to actually kind of context this with association communication, if that's okay, because I was part of your communications team for years before I shifted out into the allied community as a restaurant consultant for a broadline distributor. And I got to say that email, I think, is probably the most effective vehicle that I've seen, and that's flavored with Corona, but getting that information out. And so I'm a restaurant consultant for a broadline distributor, and I serve the industry, but I also serve as an educational person, communications person for the sales force, the people that are connecting person to person with a lot of the restaurant operators. And when I see a valuable email come by, I start sharing it out. And within a few months, I started to see all of my other colleagues, all of my other sales associates start to reshare all of those emails or get emails or communication pieces from the association and say, Andy, did you see this? Or they'll CC me with another operator. And of course, that drives them through a communications funnel into the website. But that's where I see communication really starting to spike and hit. I don't think that it's a lot more direct than it is through social media. And I think that people are prioritizing the information that they see from the Hospitality Association when it comes into their inbox.
Now, a conundrum with email is if you're the sender, and you know this as well. I mean, I know Harbor sends a lot of emails out as well to your customers. That's probably a major source of communications for your team as well. If you don't know if they've received it, and then a month later they tell you, how come you never talk to me, Andy? Because we never hear emails from you. But it's not our fault that Microsoft decides to add a new filter,
right.
or they have very aggressive firewalls that take anything out unless it's been pre-authorized as a whitelisted email address. How do you? What are your thoughts on that?
That's tough for any business entity, and that trickles right into social media. Like, as you know, if you're a business page that's posting, you could have 10,000 followers, and maybe 1,000 are going to even see an email that comes through their wall. Sorry, a social media post that comes through their wall, and it's not that different with email. It's just a wider aperture, I think. I don't really have a really clear answer for that. But I can tell you that, back to my previous point, when things are coming from an individual that you already know, that tends to grab your attention a lot easier, especially for a restaurant operator who's getting hundreds of emails a day of people who want something from them. They want that extra pound of whatever. And but when it's coming from a person that they know, like maybe somebody that I've worked with, when they see my email come through that I'm forwarding from the association, they almost always say, "Thanks, Andy, I appreciate it." So I guess that's why I'm still standing on the email soapbox, is because it's a clearer way of passing information along. It may be a second generation hit as opposed to that first generation surface hit, but I know that pain all too well. We struggle with that every day that we work together, is how do we make more relevant emails that are going to get attention and get consumed so people know what we're doing for them.
Yeah, no, that is the conundrum that we have. But yet people come to us, and survey after survey, people say email is the preferred way that they receive information. But there's a point to that too. I know in the surveys that we've done as an association, the limit was typically 3 emails a week. Mm-hmm. But when you have different different parts of the organization trying to reach the same members. Sometimes three emails a week is almost undoable, right?
Yeah. I remember that coming up a lot with these surveys, that we would hear loud and clear that email is their preferred mode of communication. Then we'd also hear loud and clearly, I'm getting too many emails. So, I mean, what do you do with that? You just keep trying to walk that really fine line in between content and frequency. I don't know. I think that if anybody can say what the right formula is or what the right tactic to use to find that line, it's you.
Well, this is my theory on email. I think that email is, I know that I look at email every day. You probably look at email every day, probably multiple times a day. And we think a little bit alike on some of the email fronts. So we probably have about 50 email addresses each. So,
yeah,
so I've got emails for different things. There's a kind of a side note. There's a service called Burner Mail that allows you to set up forwarding addresses. So what I've been doing lately, and there's a browser extension. So if I go into, let's say, Skylum software, and then I sign up for their newsletter, I want to receive their newsletter, but I also fully well know that they could abuse that intentionally or unintentionally. And all of a sudden I could find that email address, which is my main email address that I use for everything, maybe, is on everybody's list. And then I'm going to have to unsubscribe to all of these things. And even that you have to worry about, because then if you're unsubscribing or you're giving them your email address, there's that baseline paranoia that users have whenever they do this, because they've been abused so many times, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that, so from a user's perspective, I encourage people using things like burner email, secondary emails. And, I have a Yahoo Mail that I look at maybe once every 3 months. Right. So, and I think a lot of people are doing that. But the best way to navigate that is what I call trying to get the bat phone from the individual. And how do you get that, right? Because in the end, you've got your, Andy at harborfoods.com email address. I've got Lex at Wa Hospitality. So that's your work email. Right. But also, let's face it, I mean, when you go home at the night and then you maybe sign up for Netflix or some of these things, well, what's the email address do you use for that? Because you got to know if your, bills are being paid, blah, 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 stuff like that. Well, you've got your BAT email address, so it could be your Gmail address. It could be a personal domain that you've reserved. So let's say, Andy, you got andycook.com, and then you get all emails from that. I think a lot of people do that, whether intentionally or unintentionally. So what we've done as an association, what I try to do from just general email best practices, is trying to utilize your team, and not just your communications team, but whole organization. This is an organizational-wide effort. Odds are they're communicating with one or multiple branches of your organization. So if they, maybe they signed up originally and they gave their general, Joe's Cafe Foods.com email address that they get for all company related communications. But we all know Joe only checks that email once a week. Right. What you want Joe's email address that he checks every day. And often it could be a Gmail account. It could be something else. It could be they're paying for a Google Apps account or something like that they use their main domain or their main email address. And getting that it takes a little bit of sleuthing and it requires some persistence, because people don't like to give that away. Just like, like for me, I've got several email addresses for different things. I also have several phone numbers for different things. For those of you who've never set up a Google Voice account, I encourage you to get a Google Voice account, because you could use that for whenever you got to give your phone number to the grocery store, right? Yeah. To do all those things. So people go through Google Voice, and then I can choose not to answer them. I can choose to count them as spam, but I don't give them my direct cell phone number, because that's much more difficult to get them off that list. So I think trying to get that bat phone is a really key strategy that I think organizations need to do year round.
Right. Can you name one tactic that you use as the director of communications that helps to circumvent that professional ignored email to the more personal email?
Well, I think one of the things that we've found is when people really want to attend a webinar, they'll give you the right email address. They'll give them the email address that they're going to pay attention to. Right. And oftentimes that is their work email address, right? and sometimes they give you a different work email address even. So, but what we found is there's a certain percentage, and it depends on the nature of the webinar, that members and folks that are directly or indirectly involved with us give their personal email address, because this is happening at a certain time, and especially now where everybody is working remotely, and they're much more open to maybe giving out an email address that they're more likely to address, because maybe their corporate email is a little bit more difficult to access, right? When you're remote, or they just don't want to deal with it, and they have Gmail open all the time or whatever. And so what we found is, I don't know, it could be anywhere from 5 to 10 to even higher percentage of people who register for our webinars are using a different email address than what's in the system.
Interesting.
And so
every little bit counts, right?
Yeah. And it's ongoing. I mean, when you're doing, and it's probably closer to 5% now, but in the beginning it was a lot higher. But now it's probably even, I would say, a set 5%, sometimes lower. When you're having 3 or 4 webinars a week, then it's like, okay, sometimes people just subscribe to that. Then you kind of have their system, and you kind of have your webinar groupies, right, that are attending every webinar. I think, Andy, I think you're one of our webinar groupies, I think. So
yeah, probably. And to that point, if it's a webinar that means something to me, I want you to have my professional email address, because that's the calendar that rules my work life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's one tactic. There's also a tactic that I haven't employed as wide as I'd like, but I've been testing, where you can acquire people's email addresses through social media logins, right? Mm-hmm. So instead of them, and you've seen this probably on some sites where they go to a website and they give you the option, sign up for this software service, and use your Gmail account, use your Yahoo account, use your Twitter account, or leave us your email address. And then, and so they almost encourage you to use those other things. Employing that in some of your signups and some of those other features, that actually is another way of a great way of extracting email addresses from, or the BAT email addresses, as I call them, from folks that, that would be more likely to utilize that than their corporate email address or their traditional public email address.
Yeah, I can speak a little more on that point. I'm working with a company called Margin Edge, and we've developed a partnership with this company it's a service for restaurateurs to justify their invoicing with their point of sale and their accounting through an app with just snapping a picture. But I'm not going to sales pitch Margin Edge, but their marketing team, I've been working with them, and they're using the sign up with Google option. And they've got Facebook too, but sign up with Google has been the hidden gem in this, because it's easier. And so you've eliminated a barrier of going through setting up a password or whatever else it is, just signing up with Google. But that gives you a database, and now they're doing some marketing through Google posting. So this is where this email conversation shifts a little bit towards social media, is posting directly to Google is becoming a lot more of a relevant platform, because it's sort of sidestepping a lot of those social media engagement portals, and they're finding great success in their marketing reach by retargeting through people's Google identities. Not only is it getting their Google Gmail account, but when you put a little bit of money towards an ad, it'll start to populate some of those Google ads and track you around the internet.
So I know you and I have a lot of experience in retargeting, and that's evolved so much over the years. It's kind of funny, when I think it was like maybe 5 years ago, Andy, when we were working together, and some of our coworkers were saying, "Oh, there's this new thing called retargeting or remarketing," and that was the big buzzword. And here we are 5 years later, and it continues to evolve. I mean, it's an amazing feature, but now it's gotten very sophisticated to the point where, there's privacy concerns that is now kind of factored in. So there's precursors and prerequisites in order to navigate through that information. Now, what do you mean though by posting to Google? Do you mean like just posting an ad, or?
Yeah, well, it doesn't even have to be an ad. You can put money behind it, but just like you would create a tweet or a Facebook post, you can post directly to your Google My Business account.
Oh,
and that'll start to populate and follow different behaviors or click patterns that people are using. And once you put money behind it, then Google will start to retarget. It's kind of funny because I also remember when we started getting this, and it was really cool, but you had to do a lot of the heavy lifting yourself. And then it's sort of this weird balancing act where people start to become more concerned about just how Wild West this information is being exchanged. And so they start putting limitations on it on one side, but on the other side, they start making all that retargeting more automated and easy. So they put more rules up, then they make it easier to happen. So you don't really need to send one of your or two of your communications people to a 3-day seminar on Google retargeting. That they start to build in these tools and become more automated and using more machine learning to do that heavy lifting for you.
And have you heard of email retargeting? Now that we're still talking about email, there's tools out there and it's only a certain percentage. I think it's anywhere from 10 to 20% of overall users are. I don't know exactly the mechanics behind it, but it's considered just an anonymous user, but their email is somehow attached to that cookie or something. And you go to a website and they apply these retargeting email or this retargeting pixel similar to Facebook and Google and all the others, and even I think Bing has one. And they're able to capture. Let's say you get a site traffic of 1,000 visitors a day, unique visitors. They will be able to capture maybe 50 to 100 of those and get their email addresses and add them into your system. The challenge with that, which is what they've found, with this platform, is that if you don't follow up with that individual within 24 hours, they become useless, because all of a sudden, it sounds like it's a 24-hour gap. Because if you capture that email address and you email them a week later, they'll view it as spam. If you capture the email without them really realizing it, because they just go to your site, and many of us have gone to sites. I mean, I know, Andy, you've gone to sites. I know I have. And then all of a sudden, an hour later, I get an email saying, "Hey, we've noticed that you went to our site." Right? I didn't give my email address. I didn't go to the shopping cart. All I know is they sent me an email saying, "Hey, now I adjusted my privacy settings. That doesn't happen to me anymore." But for general consumers, that might not be the case. But the key is to reply back to them within 24 hours. Ideally, the quicker the better. So let's say 2 hours after they go to your site, you have an automation in the back end, whatever email platform you're using, and it triggers them to add them to a tag, and then they're just added to that list. So hold on, go ahead and speak to that, Andy, and then I gotta let my dog in.
I can hear that. Yeah, I guess the exhausting part of that is a lot of what we're talking about is what professional athletes do to stay competitive. You're already doing a lot of things really great, but then you're putting your blood, sweat, and tears into improving your lap time by 1/10 of a second or something like that. You kind of get to that decision point of gains. Like, what's the ROI here? Is it really worth all the effort to do this to get that little bit of a bump? And then it all becomes situational, doesn't it? I haven't heard a lot about this new email targeting that you're talking about. It sounds cool in a nerd sense, but
so creepy.
Yeah, it's super creepy. But at the same time, I'm aware of those kinds of things because we were chasing down those nuance improvement points wherever we found them. So I'm not surprised that you found that too, because that seems to be encoded into your DNA.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too with email, I guess this is the email episode, right? It's also important to do A/B testing. I think that we don't find enough time to be able to do that, but whenever we can get a chance, it's important to do some A/B testing, and doing a randomized A/B testing, whether it's the subject line, whether it's the from field, because as you know, whoever it comes from has a significant impact on who opens that email or who's even counted as spam in that filter. As well as the images that you use. And there's also, you could do A/B tests of emails where just a random selection, let's say 1 in 5 users get a text-only version, and compare the open rates and the click-through rates of the text version versus the regular HTML version of the email.
Right.
And when you do that, you start developing your own best practices. The thing that associations understand, but it's really hard to apply because it does take a little bit of time and effort. And if it's just you or it's just you and a small staff, then it's hard to find this time unless you contract out or something. Is being able to do you kind of develop a profile of how your customers respond. Okay, my customers respond better to Sally as opposed to me. My customers like the RE colon on the emails as opposed to just that association
Right.
weekly email, which is the generic one. And my users typically like emails with no more than 3 images. If you do A/B testing over the course of maybe a 1 or 2 month period, you're able to establish those best practices, and that's how you're able to adjust and get those crazy open rates and crazy click-through rates. Like, we had the other day, we were disappointed because we only had a 40% open rate and a 16% click-through rate. Now,
we would have thrown a party 5 years ago if we'd have gotten those numbers.
Yeah, and this is our entire number. This is with 3,000 email addresses. This isn't like a small regionalized list. This is a statewide list.
Yeah.
So that's when you develop those best practices, it allows you to get those numbers that you strive to.
Yeah, in terms of action steps, I know that because one of the things that one of the things that I would do with you was we would handle the communications for another state's restaurant association. They would contract to us, and I would often be the point on that. And a lot of states have very small teams, and they don't have the time, maybe even to write an email, much less A/B test it. But we were always looking for those small advantages. And I remember some big surprise tactics were changing the from and making it from a name that was recognized, or even just any name, instead of from media at Wa Hospitality or whatever it was. And then just playing with the from. For instance, one state that we handled the communications for, if it was important and legislative, we would put the CEO's email address on the from line, and we would always see a bump in that. And I think it was probably helping bypass some of those spam filters at the same time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All those little tips and tricks. It's just you're always working on adjusting, because I think we're in agreement, and I think a lot of our associations that are watching this are the same thing. But also, when you drill that down, if you're a restaurant, that email list is gold. It's one of the reasons why people have that rewards kiosk where you can sign up, and they make it so easy. And they have pretty good motivations. I mean, you just go to the restaurant, you get a free appetizer. I think a restaurant that you go to, Don Juan's, that's one of the things that they do. So you get a free appetizer every couple months, right?
Yeah. Well, here's something for you. And there's an art to this. And sometimes I encounter bad practices, and I wonder why this isn't obvious to the people. Is your subject line. Sometimes, that's really what it comes down to, especially if you're incentivizing someone as a restaurateur. If you've buried the lead in your subject line, nobody's going to open it, and you're probably going to end up in Spamville. And I've seen that time and time again. I don't know if you've had that experience, but it's almost like they want to tell you a story before they get to the point. And on the internet, our attention span is tiny, and we want to absorb information at a glance. We don't actually want to read things until a glance tells us it's worth reading.
No, that's absolutely right. And it's and the thing is, it's just sticking with it, going at it, and continuing to build. Those are a lot of the fundamentals that we have. Well, I think this is we're almost at time. We want to keep these to 30 minutes. We didn't get any questions, it looks like, from the community, but it is Sunday morning.
Right.
So, I think people are just waking up, at least in the West Coast here.
Maybe one of our bottle episodes then, huh?
What's that?
Be one of our bottle episodes.
Yeah. No, it's, plus I also wanted to test up some of this new setup, this scenery when I'm doing this from home. Plus I wanted to show you my Dragon Slayer game in the background there. So, I
like your background.
Yeah. A little bit different. So, all right, Andy, any final thoughts?
No, maybe next week we can talk about it, but I was really wanted to get into I was looking forward to talking about the member versus member only content. And so I think that's going to be longer than our allotted time. And
Okay.
I don't know, what do you think? You're closer to this world than I am. I think that would be probably very interesting for not only an association to connect with their members, but for the members and what do they want to get from their association.
Well, let's do a little bit of a teaser. We have a few more minutes.
Okay. All
And
right.
what we can do is we can follow up on it in a more in-depth way next week.
Okay.
But what are your thoughts about member versus non-member access?
There was always a lot of tension within the association. Some people that were more member facing wanted everything to be members only, like it was like this exclusive club. And whereas other people that were more broad-minded, it's like, well, we would like to show our values so that more people would want to engage with us. And I think what you did at the association when COVID-19 hit was you struck the right balance where you had this members only hub. And so you had already found those two worlds to communicate to the member and the members only and the everyone. And you opened up your coronavirus hub, COVID-19 hub, and so that everybody had access to this information, and you kept it simple and you kept it categorized. And I sent countless people to the association to help stay updated, and whether they were members or not. And, it's kind of a, 3 to 5, maybe, if I'm going to be a rough estimate when I'm engaging with someone and we're looking for solutions. And I usually ask them, are you a member of the Hospitality Association? Because I'm aware of, a lot of the opportunities, the matrix of opportunities that somebody can plug into. And some people are very aware. Some people were, but it was for a specific reason. Like, I want to support government affairs. And for others, like, no, I'm not. Tell me more about it. And those are always very interesting topics to talk about, but I saw action happening once there was a need for it, and you created a members only environment that anybody could tap into.
Yeah, and I think that we found amazing traction on that. I mean, we went from 0 to almost 1,000 people just in a matter of a few months, and these are people who voluntarily add their registration information. We didn't default them in and they had to negative checkout. They actually had to go in and sign up. And so, yeah, so that's been a great experience. And it was eye-opening that to the point where, as we continue to evolve, and we are going to go through some revamps of the members only area. And I guess we can go a little bit into this next week, is because I've found over the course of the year of having this member only resource, more than a year now, that there's certain things you need to look for. If you're going to go all in on a platform, if you're going to, what type of registration do you do, what type of information you do, how you structure your membership site. That's also important because, you could sign up for a service like Kajabi or something like that, and it could be limiting. You could also go with the WordPress and do an LMS with a learning management system. That could be good, but it could also require higher technical knowledge. Right. So there's a balance there, and I think I'm coming close to that, where I've been finding a balance, and it's just kind of a spoiler alert. I've been finding that in the end, if you really want to build something from scale, WordPress is a pretty good platform to use it in, but there's right ways and wrong ways to implement it. And it doesn't mean that other tools like Kajabi or Kartra or anything else that have these platforms out there doesn't mean they don't have a purpose either. So we can go into that a little bit next week, because I think it is an exciting thing. And I think as we, continue in this new economy, post-pandemic or current pandemic economy, people are really seeing value in accessing member-only information.
Yeah, and by having that portal that you built, everyone's working remotely, and so it gives me a link to share, and it gives me a direction to face someone that they can start to go down the rabbit hole with you. And so I think striking that right balance as we start to come out of this, where you got to make some money too. You've got to show more member value, but you can still keep some top level stuff right out in front for everyone, and let them hit that member wall as they start to go through the rabbit hole, and so that they can really drive a little bit more hungry for more information and see the value in the investment into their membership.
Yeah. So let's go into that. Let's make that next week the membership show. This was the email show next week, but we got a little bit of a teaser in there. So, any final words, Andy?
Have a great week. I hope that wherever you are in this country, you're weathering it well, and you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And let's just hope it's not Darth Vader buzzing up his lightsaber.
Yeah. So echo Andy's sentiments. So, and if you have any questions, folks that are watching this that are not on the live stream, you can ask us in this thread, and we'll deal with it next week. Address it next week when we do talk about the members only areas and some of the advantages, disadvantages, best practice, and those types of things. So until then, everybody have a great week. We'll see you then. We'll probably try to do, well, I don't know, maybe we'll do weekend, but anyway, we'll figure it out. It'll be sometime either Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, probably Friday next time.
Just like emails, we'll find the right day and time to hit our audience.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
All right. So long.